Welcome to our daily devotional for January 22nd, 2021. Our verse for the day comes to us from Hebrews chapter 10, verse 23, which says, "Let us hold tightly, without wavering, to the hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep his promise." Now, a question I have for many of us is, are you zoomed out? That's a new term that's being used, which describes the feelings of Christ followers regarding virtual worship, oftentimes conducted online using the iCloud platform for video and audio, and also conferencing programs like Zoom or using other similar applications. Now, while many churches have adopted virtual worship and other means to maintain social distancing during these infectious times, like what we're doing now with this video version of a daily devotional, none of those alternate or virtual realities can fully compensate for Christian worship as an in-person, side-by-side experience. Now, some say that the past 10 months have been the longest that they have been physically absent from a church. And they absolutely miss the wonderful chaos and the mess of worship services, but particularly the common and small acts of grace that come from in-person connections, like human touch with someone, for instance, who's been sick, and then praying for them. They describe missing the echo of voices when we say the Lord's Prayer, those well-worn words where our voice may drop out at times because we're so tired or so sad, and other people then carry the prayer on for us with their own voices. However, though in-person worship is what you and I may miss, and what we want, we need not minimize the power and the effectiveness of online, on-air, or other forms of worship that maintain pandemic-related physical distancing. We can recognize that there are certain strengths in these types of worship. In fact, some people have found that online worship shows them that we are a church across a much greater distance and a much bigger body than we may have previously recognized. Through Christ, we have the power to turn problems into, instead, opportunities for new and different ways of being the church today. And some of the new worship platforms will continue as worthwhile supplements to in-person worship. Our challenge, yours and mine, in all of this, is to figure out how can we continue responding to God's call for us to be the church and think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. From Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25. So for any that are missing that in-person worship and other activities, and who are mourning the loss of the way things were prior to March of this past year, please consider making a sincere and committed effort to do what's possible even now for Christian fellowship in new and different ways. Even though we're still in the midst of adapting to pandemic-related considerations, it is still vital for followers of Christ to embrace new and different ways of being in fellowship, recognizing that Christian fellowship helps us focus on the way, the truth, and the life of Jesus Christ. It makes us stronger. It provides support and encouragement. It reminds us we're not alone, and it helps us grow. Our passage for today comes to us from the book of Hebrews, and I'll be reading to you from the New Living Translation of God's holy word, from Hebrews chapter 10, verses 19 through 25. And so, dear brothers and sisters, we can boldly enter heaven's most holy place because of the blood of Jesus. By his death, Jesus opened a new and life-giving way through the curtain into the most holy place. And since we have a great high priest who rules over God's house, let us go right into the presence of God with sincere hearts, fully trusting him. For our guilty consciences have been sprinkled with Christ's blood to make us clean, and our bodies have been washed with pure water. Let us hold tightly, without wavering, to the hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep his promise. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. And additional suggested readings to supplement today's devotional would come from Matthew chapter 16, verse 18, Matthew chapter 18, verses 19 and 20, Acts chapter 2, verses 42 through 47, and 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 12 through 31. Blessings to you and yours from the Ione Community Church.